I think we'll get started, even as one or two still trickle in. Welcome to our presentation on culturally specific trauma-informed design. We're excited to be here and share what has been, for this team, about a 12-year journey of exploring not just how to better provide housing for our Native American community here in the Portland area, but how to do that in a culturally specific, very intentional, trauma-informed way. And with each of our projects, we have learned and built on our knowledge, and we continue to evolve on that. So we're here to share that with you. My name is Brian Carleton with Carleton Hart Architecture, and our firm has been extremely honored to partner with NAIA for these 12 years and NARA for most of those years. And it's been an incredibly meaningful interaction with us, a relationship for us to be involved with NAIA and to be able to really integrate ourselves into this culturally specific design. So it's just been incredibly meaningful to the firm. One quick note, none of us are professional speakers, and yet we're going to be passing mics back and forth, so we assume you'll forgive us and just laugh with us as we work our way through this presentation. So.
Thanks, Brian. My name's Keith Ferrante. I'm the Design and Construction Project Manager at NAIA. And my tribal affiliations are Blackfeet and Choctaw. And I'm going to pass it to my colleague here to introduce themselves before we get started.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Amy Thompson. I'm the Director of Housing Services with the Native American Rehabilitation Association of the Northwest, also known as NARA.
Thanks, Amy. So I just want to let everybody know that today's presentation focus is really going to be on NAIA, which let me let you know who NAIA is a little bit. So we are the Native American Youth and Family Center. And we're going to be looking at our housing portfolio of, as Brian mentioned, the last 12 years. And we're going to take that through a cultural lens. And we're doing that with support and guidance we've had in partnership with NARA through that time. And we understand that this process is unique to our organizations and how we've approached development. But I believe the takeaway and the outcomes for all of us is going to be the possibilities of addressing trauma within housing and how to lead with organizational and cultural values. So to give everyone a little bit more understanding of who NAIA is, we have a multi-decade history of providing services to Portland's Native communities as an urban Indian agency. So our reach and our impact is over 10,000 individuals within the Portland metro area of 380 different tribal backgrounds. We are founded by parent and elder volunteers in 1974, and we're sustained by diverse Native traditions and programs that are expanding and modernizing to meet the needs of the Native people. NAIA serves self-identified Native Americans from infants to elders across Portland metro area, and our mission is to enhance the diverse strengths of our youth and families in partnership with the community through cultural identity and education. So NAIA believes that traditional cultural values are integral to regaining our sovereignty and building self-esteem of our community. Thank you.
All right, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about NARA Northwest. NARA was also founded by community members in 1970 by a group of Native Americans who were supporting each other in recovery from addictions and homelessness, and they wanted to bring that fellowship to other Native Americans in the community. And so they founded NARA. They started addictions treatment programs. We still have residential and outpatient substance use disorder treatment for adults and for youth. And over the decades, culturally specific services have expanded. We have a full array of mental health services. We offer primary medical care at 2 healthcare clinics. We have dental services. And we have some prevention programs focusing on suicide prevention, diabetes prevention, and substance abuse prevention for youth. So we offer this whole array of clinical services, but when individuals are experiencing houselessness, it's very difficult to really take advantage of those services because you're more focused on survival needs. And this is why NARA really began developing housing resources. So we recognized that the community we were serving needed that extra support. And so today we offer permanent supportive housing. We're supporting 250 households, both in scattered site permanent supportive housing with voucher and support services, as well as several projects that are site-based, including 2 of our collaborations with NAIA and a third one in development. So that's a little bit about what NARA does. All of our services are really focused on promoting wellness and recovery, with an emphasis on building community and really connecting people to culture. NARA has a saying, culture is healing. And we also have a staff team of culture keepers, and these are individuals who have a lot of lived expertise in Native American culture. They are there as consultants for all staff. They guide the agency and make sure that we are, staying true to those cultural values. So, and I want to acknowledge right now too that I'm here to present my knowledge and perspective as an ally, as a service provider. I've had the privilege of working within the Native community for several years. I am not here representing the voice of Native Americans who have experienced generations of trauma. So,
Okay. We've practiced this a lot. So just wanted to give you all a quick roadmap of what we're going to talk about today, just so you have a picture of where we're heading. So the first thing we want to talk about is just the impact of trauma. And again, all of this is through that cultural lens and specific to the Native American community. But so we want to talk about trauma in general and the impact of trauma. We want to talk about the process of reclaiming culture and infusing that culture into our projects and integrating it into programs in place. Then we want to talk about our engagement process with the Native American community with each of our projects. That's an absolutely critical element for all of our projects in order to get a good foundation. And then we want to talk about the elements of trauma-informed design that we infuse in our projects, and that has been a growing process. We'll take you through that. And then we'll get into some specific projects that we've worked on together and take you through that. And hopefully we talk fast enough that we have time for questions and answers. So.
Thanks, Brian. So I'm going to give us just a little story about NAIA's housing journey. So it was almost 2 decades ago now that NAIA was approached by another housing organization in Portland, who's now defunct, and they were they were closing their doors and needing to reallocate their assets. And at that time, NAIA was not involved in housing directly. It was about 50 units over dispersed sites in North Portland. And there were distressed properties, and we took that on as an organization, and kind of realizing that in our culture, when you're gifted something, it's not to take possession, it's really to be caretaker and to look out for that artifact and to carry it forward. So we went ahead and did that, and we spent a lot of time figuring out how to best serve our community and how housing played an important role in that. So the projects you're going to see today are a culmination of that vision. And we also want to acknowledge the people in leadership who've contributed to that. So a lot of that was brought on with previous leaders at NAIA, such as Ray Espana, our recently departed CEO, Paul Lumley, and our current interim CEO, Oscar Arana. Without that, this vision wouldn't have been possible and implemented in what we see today. So we also want to obviously acknowledge the partnerships and the stakeholders and funders along the way, and we'll be addressing that in the presentation, but without them, this obviously work wouldn't be possible. So thank you.
Okay, so we wanted to start out with just kind of an overview of trauma, since that informs everything that follows. So I especially appreciate this image. It's a painting by Oscar Howe. It's called Fleeing a Massacre. There was a recent exhibit, Oscar Howe exhibit at the Portland Art Museum called Dakota Modern, and this was one of the featured paintings. It's based on a personal story from his grandmother that she told him about a time when she was shot in the hand by U.S. military when her community was attacked. And I feel that this image just really speaks to the source of the trauma experienced by Native Americans today and its continued impact. So, all right. So we start by defining trauma in a very general sense and listing types of trauma. I'm not going to read through the slide. This is a definition and a list that's not unique to any particular culture or society, but just to get a general reminder of what we mean when we talk about trauma. And then this next slide provides more context to the historical trauma experienced by Native Americans and its impact. So these are just a few broad examples of historical trauma that is experienced by Native Americans. The Indian Removal Act that was signed by President Jackson is really the genesis of the Trail of Tears, which forced people from their homelands to walk for months to reservations on unfamiliar land. Many people, as we probably all learned in school, many people died on that journey. I think it's important to note as well that with the forced boarding schools, that went on even through the 1960s, and there are survivors of that forced boarding school that live in the community today and that we are serving. The termination relocation period resulted in many tribes losing federal recognition, so people lost their tribal status, they lost their land. And then relocation was an effort to move individuals from reservations into urban areas with the promise of good jobs and housing. And shortly after I started working at NARA, one of the culture keepers told me his story of relocation. He was 18 years old. He was from the Pine Ridge Reservation. He'd grown up on that reservation his whole life. He was given a one-way bus ticket to Los Angeles. And he talks about stepping off the bus. He had $25 in his pocket, and that was it. And he never received the assistance with a good job and housing, and he ended up homeless on the streets of Los Angeles, fell into addiction, eventually found his way to Portland and to NARA, and was one of the early founders of NARA, in fact. So his story is just one of many thousands, and so you can imagine the impact with all of these examples of being sent away from everything that's familiar without any support network and without the adequate resources to survive. And all these factors really come back to displacement from home, and that contributes to the current state of houselessness among Native Americans today, where the Native Americans experience houselessness at extremely disproportionate rates. So it's really important to, I think we skipped one. Next one. Okay, great. So I think it's important to look at these traumas and how they inform the needs of many urban Native American communities today. And so again, I'm not going to read through the slide, but everything that these traumas took away is what needs to be restored and adapted to current realities. So, and this is a picture of one of NARA's culture keepers, Maggie. And I will read this quote: "It would be a horrible thing if we were unable to break bad habits and change." And I feel that that is a great example of kind of an indirect message of hope. So with that, I'll pass it on to Keith.
Thanks, Amy. I appreciate that. So it's also not lost on me, as someone who identifies as white, with with a Native American parent, that, you know, a lot of these traumas are not something I've experienced personally, but I've seen them with my family. I've heard about them from my parents, and I've seen it in my work. So I just want to acknowledge that these are not something that I've experienced, but in our work, we must carry this forward and figure out a way to solve these problems and provide the support that's needed. Along that line too, it's also important to understand that Native Americans are diverse people with different backgrounds, and it's always an honor to serve our people. So the challenge we have, on the previous slide there, Brian, so I'll try not to read through this as well, but we do have that challenge, especially like as Amy's identified all of the different the genocide and the impacts to our culture the last 300 to 400 years, and it's still currently happening. And what I've seen a lot growing up was a lot of the assimilation policies. And growing up, we didn't really have a cultural place to call our home. We would travel back to the reservation within our tribe. So I think as we look at these items up here on the slide, it's important that this fight for our cultural values still takes place every day. And reconnecting and establishing those cultural values is also part of the work. And how we can move that forward and what NAIA does with our community members. At the same time, we also must meet their immediate needs. So that's really important, and it's really the challenge we have here. So looking on the next slide now, Brian, thank you. I'll do my best not to read through this one, but on your left side, what we have is just our different programs and how do we establish programs with place. You know, we have a wide variety of services and programs, and we are first a service community service provider before we're a housing agency, or urban housing, urban housing agency. But we also need to look internally, how are our programs being led? What type of feedback do we do? What's our intentionality with our work? And then also, when we look out for technical support and guidance, who do we look to? On the right side is really kind of our vision statements when we look at housing. We want to be sure that we're centralizing the Native families. We're centering the Native person within the housing. We're not just meeting the needs, but as a wraparound service provider, we're also providing opportunities. And then the Native community, we need a place that looks and feels like home. And we want to express our culture and our indigenous ways. So one thing you're going to see in these projects that Brian's now going to present is just, we want every one of our communities to look like a Native building, to look like a Native home, for our community members to really identify it. And that's some of the work we're going to talk about here now. Oh, I'm sorry. I got ahead of myself. So how do we do that? So engaging with our community. So there's different challenges with that, but we have different ways we do that. So we look at what the challenges are. We've always been centered on the youth and family, and then we also seek guidance within our elders and the staff and previous leadership. So we also, obviously with NARA, work closely to identify and hone our programs, and also within our cultural keepers within the organization, within the community. And then on occasion, we do get asked this quite often, but it's only on a occasional basis, but tribal leaders and representatives do play a role, but really we're pan-indigenous when we focus on our work. Thanks, Brian.
Yep. So just before we launch into projects, a little bit about trauma-informed design. And again, I'll try not to read too much, but some really critical issues here. And anyone here who has worked in trauma-informed design will recognize most of these tenets and concerns. for us, we've always taken these and really dive deep into what it means from that cultural perspective. And we'll talk about that as we go through the projects, but we take all of these elements and really apply that cultural lens and ask ourselves, what does it mean to the Native American community? And so, things like visibility and being able to see through spaces, having a command of your space, the connections of staff to residents, welcoming spaces, are all really important to any good housing project, quite frankly. Intentional color schemes and thoughtful patterns, that's a really interesting topic when you're trying to infuse Native American references in art and graphics into your project, and asking yourself about the color palette and the patterns that you use and how to maintain a peaceful environment. And so that gets a lot of discussion. One of the amazing things that we've been able to do with our projects with NAIA is there is art everywhere and these cultural references everywhere. And it's just a dream come true for an architect to be able to approach their work with this focus on art and graphics and infuse that into the projects. And we do that, again, through this trauma-informed lens. Natural materials, and we talk a lot about natural materials and biophilia. When we're working with the Native community, that transcends into sacred materials and materials that are incredibly meaningful to the Native culture, and how do we infuse those into projects? Lots of natural daylight. Again, it transcends from being good, healthy spaces to spiritual spaces. And then we'll talk about things such as wayfinding and security cameras and that type of thing in projects. One interesting thing about security cameras that came up in our discussion, it's always a hot topic of conversation in our projects, how residents react to that level of security. For all the best intentions, sometimes the reaction is that people feel like they're being spied on and that type of thing. The feedback we've gotten from our projects is that security cameras are very welcome and really help instill that sense of security. So, and as Keith said earlier, as we address these concerns, first and foremost, we are always trying to be distinctly Native. And as we go into projects, it was Paul Lumley who sent the edict that when people approach a NAIA development, a NAIA community, he wants them to know whether they're Native Americans or white or any other culture. He wants to know that this project was designed and built by the Native American community and for the Native American community. So that idea of just being distinctly and overtly Native has been critical to us. So jumping into projects, the first project we did together, and we started work on this about 12 years ago, and it took 4 years or so to get under construction, as many projects do. And this is Generations. It's out in the Lentz neighborhood. I want to real quickly identify the partners on this. NAIA teamed up with Guardian Development on this project, and so Guardian was the lead developer, and NAIA was partnered with them, and then Carleton Hart was the design architect on it. This was our first endeavor together, and in those 4 years leading up to construction, much of that was the non-Native partners in the team really diving deep into the Native culture. There was a lot of reading, a lot of engaging, listening, observing, asking questions. And so there's just a lot of time for the team to come up together and understand the values, understand as best we could the culture, and talk a lot about how that manifests itself into each of our projects. So this as a lead off, in many ways looks maybe more typical of our housing projects, where the touches were more specific and intentional. You can see on the left the mural, which is that really amazing forward graphic that announces who lives in this community. The colors we chose were really reflective of natural colors, soothing colors, but really colors that were found in the natural environment. And then the center slide, the importance of gardening and growing, was centerpiece to the project as well. In these slides, you'll see the use of cedar quite a bit, and that's, again, a sacred material to Native culture here in the Northwest. And so we were looking for any opportunity we could to bring cedar into the project and have it exposed. The next project on our journey was Nasaika Ilahi. This is up at Northeast 42nd and Holman. And here we're taking that concept of Native and Indigenous design a step further. We're really looking for more organic building forms, always keeping in mind construction efficiencies and the typical things that we all have to deal with when we develop affordable housing, but really looking for the opportunity to engage with more organic building forms and explore those. This was also our first endeavor into really introducing art in a stronger way into our projects. And so you can see on the left, upper left, is an outdoor forecourt at the entry of the project, where we actually have a courtyard filled with art and native plantings as well, indigenous plants, as an entry into this into the project. And then lower left is art in the lobby space. And the ceiling, if you notice, it's a wood slatted ceiling that actually has contours to it. And that's actually, those contours reflect the contours of kind of the Columbia Basin here in our area. And it's taken off of a topographic map. And this project is the community that's closest to NAIA's home campus, and we talked a lot about geography and location and the kind of the roots of the Native community here in the Columbia, Willamette area, Portland, as we now call it. Just a couple of other examples: the interiors of the community room in the lower right. Just the introduction of wood, as much as we could afford and as much as we were able to get exposed wood in the project, so that we've got that tactile, warm material, heavy timber use. And then art as wayfinding. The center picture was one of our corridor, come off the elevator, come off the stairway, and this is what you see to identify this is your floor in your home, and the infusion of art in that process.
Thanks, Brian. I'm going to talk about the next project, which actually is just a mile down the road. This is Mamuk Tokati, which means make beautiful. So with this project as well, this community here, and as well as the previous one with Nasaika Lehi, that also means our home. So with these properties, they're located close to our campus, the NAIA campus, and it was really important for us as we went on this development process is that we began to center our housing next to our services and creating more of a cultural neighborhood, which is predominantly in the Coley neighborhood. So the other intentionality we had was when we approached these projects was also a process of providing them with native naming, and names and identity are very important to us as well. So Nasaika Lehi uses and Mamuk Tokati uses the Chinook Wawa, which is the historical trade language of the area. So Mamuk Tokati, Make Beautiful, really had an intentional focus on artists and art in the realm of our community, and artists being really our cultural keepers and leaders within our community. So the art and the work that they provide is we really wanted to elevate that, and how could we have a building for Native artists. One of the some of the process we did on this was we actually had so let me step back a little bit. So these properties also are developed in collaboration and partnership with community development partners, Nasaika Lehi, Mamuk Tokati, and the one after this you'll see. So we're grateful for that partnership, and it really allowed NAIA to focus on the cultural intentionality of the projects. And then another partner for this project and the previous one is the Confederated Tribe of Siletz Indians. We were grateful to bring them on as not just a cultural partner, but also a financial partner. They invested in both of these projects, and therefore we were able to like integrate a lot of specific tribal imagery and elements into these that we don't always do. So want to acknowledge those partners and their role in the project. And when we looked at this project, we really wanted to start off with a really focused engagement about what Mamuk Tokati was going to be. So what we actually had was I'm looking for the name of it, but yes, we had a very specific community circle before the project even started, where we brought some leaders together in how we were going to properly name the building, what was going to be the themes, what was going to be the vision, who were we going to be serving. And they came up with a great statement that we really wanted to be about beauty, and that the statement they put together is beauty is not just about physical appearances, but it's a deeper connection to our many communities, our cultures, our artistic expressions. Art commissioned to enliven the spaces will underscore our continued presence as a diverse community, some with deep roots in this place and others with more recent histories. And creating that statement, they also created the name Make Beautiful, and they wanted the art in this building to be welcoming, calming, and a sense of pride. Now, I think we can move probably to the next slide there, Brian. So not only did we adore the ground floor with art, but we also have a community space for teaching and learning art. So we have a very specific art studio that's separate from our community gathering room, which you see in the middle. And that was really to allow that space to create those bonds, that preservation, that reconnection of culture. And then you'll see as well, we have interior and exterior murals within the building as well. So I think there's some really important quotes to take out of this. With our most recent project, we've been very engaged in actually having a cultural coordinator facilitating the art space. There's daily interactions and feedback we're getting. One of the quotes here, all the fantastic indigenous artists that have made this building are gorgeous. From framed art work to the murals, have given my kids a feeling of home sweet home, a place to belong, a place to be proud of, a safe space. I love that I can provide for myself and my children with a beautiful home that is full of culture and creative expressions. And one thing we do have is, as you've seen in the previous project too, is that we've taken great effort to have artwork among the community areas. So there's a lot of wall art that is selected through NAIA staff. We took on that process. With some of this work, we learned that we were going to be the best purveyors of this art, and we started working with an outside consultant, and we said, I think we can do this, and we can do it our way, and it's been amazing. So we've got a great collection now within these buildings of indigenous art. So the next project I'm going to introduce and then hand over to Brian after some discussions is just Hayutilixum, which is mini nations. So this is another project with community development partners and also with NARA as a service provider. This one we did not engage the Confederate Tribe of Siletz, but this is one through the PHB housing bond. And after Mamuk Tokati, we had a lot of opportunities and discussions about art and how that can play a role in healing. And we wanted to express our artists and our culture in a contemporary way. We were at the previous project relying on a lot of traditional art and studio art. And how can we work with artists to show that we are still here, we are contemporary people, we're modern, we're not traditionalist, and express this in a way that is also healing. So you'll see our main entrance here. This was designed by Lillian Pitt, and we were really being innovative in some of the work that Lillian's done before and with her team, and how can we take imagery from the Columbia River and the many tribes who've come before us and express this in a contemporary way, in ways that residents can connect with. And then I'll also talk a little bit about our process, is that we realize there's a lot of Native artists doing work digitally, and that to really feel that empowering effect, we did a lot of wall graphic installations, so very large size format. We have a dozen paintings that are reproductions or photo imagery. And when we used that imagery, we also used photo imagery of ancestral lands that people could connect with. We also used a color scheme that helped identify wayfinding, and we also used indigenous persons in those imagery, usually by indigenous photographers or those closely aligned with our community. So it really gave us a lens to experience the building on a cultural level. And then I'm gonna let Brian kind of go through all of how we've learned so much about our trauma-informed design process and how that is envisioned in the project.
And one thing, I'm actually going to jump up so I can point at the screen, but one thing I did want to mention, this was also a project that we brought a collaborator, a Native American architect onto the team, Daniel Glenn from 7 Directions. He's out of Seattle. And we brought him in during the conceptual and the schematic design phase to really work with us, draw from his experience in translating culture into architecture. And he added just a ton of value in terms of how we arrange spaces. This particular project really launched with almost Amy being the lead designer. We talked so much about trauma-informed design and everything that we'd learned from past projects. By the time we went into design on this project, Nasaika Ilahi, the number 2 project, was up and running, and we were starting to learn lessons. Mamuk Tokati was still under construction, but from Nasaika, we were already starting to learn lessons from that. And so between Amy's leading the way on the trauma-informed design, and then Daniel joining us for that cultural perspective, we just felt really good about that design process. And so, this is the ground floor plan, and I'm hoping it reads well enough. I'll do a lot of pointing, but just describing how this evolved, through the trauma-informed lens. The entry, we've got Prescott Street right here. Oh, look at you! Thanks. I'll just follow the dot. Yeah, we've got, and it is actually a struggle. It's a very tight site right there off of Prescott, and it took a lot to fit this program into the site. We had goals for minimum number of units. It was a PHB site, and we had to meet certain goals.
What's the square footage of our lot here?
That's a good question. It's. Yeah.
I think it's, it might be 20, 25,000.
Yeah, it's approximately 100 by 200, I think a little bit deeper. Yeah, and it was important for various reasons to get a certain amount of parking on the site. You can see it's very limited, but we wanted to try to get that in. And credit where credit is due, Daniel really came in and helped with some of the organization of the ground floor spaces to get the entry in the right place and get the spaces organized rightly. 5 minds are better than 3, so. So we've got the entry right here off of Prescott, and one of the critical things was we wanted staff and resident service providers to be right up front, watching people coming and going. And so we've got resident services and staff offices right here at the front door so that there's that constant connection. It's visibility going both directions. We want the residents to be connected with staff and know that they're there to support. We also wanted staff to be engaged with the residents, to watch them coming and going, recognize who they haven't talked to in a while, who they need to connect with. So we just put that up front and center. Then we've got two primary community spaces. We've got the main community space here, which is families, maybe a little more adult oriented, and then we've got a children's oriented community space across the courtyard. And in terms of visibility and connection, once you walk into this space through interior windows, exterior window walls that actually raise, you can actually stand here and see clear through the community space, the courtyard, and into the children's space. And so there's this constant sense of connection and community coming together. We wanted to introduce the curve and the curved circulation. Again, trauma-informed design tenets, with breaking down the square corners and trying to introduce more organic forms. But it also helps with visibility, so that people can see where they're headed, look around those corners. And it gave us wonderful opportunities for art. One of the slides on the previous one, we can go back to that in just a second. We're standing in the courtyard, looking through the children's space and looking at a mural on this wall. There's a large piece of art along this wall that I think is in the presentation coming up, where you can stand in the courtyard and see right through, and that's part of that experience. And we've got our laundry room back over here so that parents can be doing the laundry and be connected to that kids' space. So there's just this whole sense of connection within the community and between staff and community, and integrating all of that. The courtyard is a really critical space in terms of bringing nature into the project, and our opportunity for plantings in this really dense urban site. Yeah, just real quickly, this center slide is standing in the courtyard and looking through to the children's space, and then the left-hand slide is in the courtyard looking up towards the curved wall.
Is this kind of location across the street from Morrison?
It is, yep. As I said, some of the learning that we had done from NSICA that was reflected in this project really was that idea of connection and getting staff connected to residents and bringing that staff right up front. Also, the idea of the importance of laundry and having a place to be when you're doing your laundry, both from a parent-child perspective and also just it's an opportunity for engagement. We all have to do laundry eventually, and it's a great way for people to get together. So the process of selecting art and materials, again, always through that trauma-informed lens. As with the past projects, we had an art committee, and we, as architects, got invited to be a part of that, and so it was amazing to be part of that process and be exposed to these incredible artists and look through these portfolios and go through the selection process. We kind of broke the art into different functions, if you will. There's the art in the main lobby space that people are being greeted with that have these strong cultural references. Both the left picture and the right picture are in community spaces. So we're looking at what function the art is serving, whether it is those strong cultural references or whether it's wayfinding, educational in some cases. The center picture, this is just one of 5 portrait photographs of Native women that is just one of the most impactful displays I've ever seen in a project. So it's that tie to culture and bringing people together. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Brian's doing a great job here, but we just really had a really intentional focus, was led by Naya and our committee for reviewing the art and who we wanted to be working with and what really exuded the qualities of the building. And then, like Brian had said, we kind of been using digital art and natural elements and ancestral lands. So we use those in different ways for wayfinding, but also to really provide that connection within the project. So, yeah, Hayutiliksum many nations, and it's really the culmination of a lot of our work and learning and experiences within our housing portfolio.
And just one last thing, I think the 2 graphics on this slide also illustrate the challenges that we put ourselves through of looking at the art and the graphics through that trauma-informed lens. And some of the pieces that we all fell in love with, we came to the conclusion that through, whether it was because of the colors and the wonderfully artistic clash of colors, or the graphics themselves that maybe were a little bit more provocative and insightful, we decided they weren't really appropriate for the project, and we had to pull back. And these 2 graphics are in the project, and we're kind of on that. They created a lot of debate, but we felt good about including them. So there's always that challenge.
So I'm gonna just kind of go over some really high level lessons learned, but I feel like that it really was a journey. And I was only an observer and a participant for, the second half of that, and a lot of lessons learned. We won't go into those into detail, but I felt like there was a process that Naya needed to do and Naya needed to experience, and we needed to do that in partnership with NARA. And I really appreciated our partnership with CHA and them as an architect, knowing that they didn't have to address every design problem, and that they were really patient and allowing and sitting back and kind of listening to our needs and working through how to resolve the issues. So I felt like that was really important, is for the architect to maybe guide and not necessarily be the problem solver. And I definitely want to stress the importance of these projects as being, a gift to us, and Naya is really the caretaker. We're doing our best with the housing to house our community and to provide this cultural lens to assisting with trauma. And I want to acknowledge NARA and Naya Resident Services, who are really doing the direct service work every day of meeting the needs of our community and stabilizing our residents and providing them with those opportunities.
Yeah, I just wanted to add with both of these projects that NARA was involved with, Nasekealahi and Hayutiliksum, and especially Hayutiliksum, there was a strong effort to involve the service provider from the beginning, and that doesn't always happen in a lot of projects. And so I really appreciated that they reached out to NARA. And once it was determined that we would be a service provider on site, we were very involved in the whole design process, and we're able to point out some things that, hey, I don't think this is really going to work. And the design team was very receptive to that, and I really appreciated that. And often as a service provider, you go into a project that's already built, and then you have to work around a lot of things that don't work. And in these projects, and especially Hayutiliksum, we're not experiencing that because we had that input early on, and I just was very much appreciated that.
So I guess I will read this quote because I understand it's probably difficult for some of you in the back to read, but this is from an elder who's contributed both to NARA and to NEA over the years. So this is from Leroy Big Boy. He's a Ogala Lakota, and he said, "Practice and practice until you get it. From the time you get up until the time you lay down, practice." So thank you all for attending. I hope we've provided some insights. We're happy to take some Q&As at this time.
Are the units like studios, 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms? Or is it like a variation in each building?
Most of the developments are family oriented, so we're trying to get as many 3 bedrooms in as possible. Not always as many as we'd like, but each of the projects were a combination of either 2 bedroom and 3 bedroom, or 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, and 3 bedroom.
Are the culturally are the trauma-informed design elements mostly just in the public spaces, or do they filter down into the individual units at all?
So the artwork is in the common spaces, whether it's the ground floor or strewn throughout all of the corridors upstairs. Which again, it's such an honor to be associated with projects where we can hang original art in our corridors and know that they're cared for and respected and cherished. Within the units, our trauma-informed approach was primarily about our combination of open spaces, open family spaces, so that the family's connected. Not that we're trying to social engineer, but we really don't want the kids hiding away in their bedrooms. So, nice, bright, open spaces. As much natural light as we can get into those with controls, so that people can control their environment. Every unit is able to control its own environment, but that natural light, and then also the use of wood. So our casework and our trim is natural wood, exposed wood, so that we're bringing that warmth and tactile material into the units.
Good morning, friends. Thanks for a wonderful presentation. Can you talk a little bit about the experience that the development team had with the institutional and public sector funders around taking up this very intentional inclusion of cultural and trauma-informed elements in the development of the project? Getting that funded, talking people into that this was important, et cetera. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So obviously it is a process, and I will kind of tie back to the cultural values, is that, and then some of the trauma elements, is that there are these colonial systems that we must adhere to and kind of align with, and there's this whole system of living and surviving. So we've been really fortunate to have experts and obviously partners who are really seasoned in the process, and figuring out how we could integrate our perspective and the cultural elements into this and where those opportunities existed. Obviously, because we've further developed that, we're really developing our own expertise and our own development in this work, and really grown into the work and the housing and what needs and how best to serve that with the system we currently have. So it's been a process, and we really appreciate all of our partners along the way who've helped us realize this.
I'll add a little bit to that, if I may. First of all, I think the importance of partnerships. Heard a great session on that from Ernesto Fonseca yesterday. Really allowed NEA to develop their capacity and their strengths, so that we're working on our fifth project together, sixth, I'm losing track, that's under construction where NEA is the prime developer. So, so just that capacity building took time. One of the biggest challenges, and I'm going to look out of the corner of my eye at Oscar over here, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I'll try to speak, but one of the biggest challenges early on was with our system of funding projects, we're bound to Fair Housing Act and fair leasing requirements. And so it was an early challenge to build these projects and have those units available for the Native American community, because we have to throw that leasing option open to everybody. And culturally, the Native culture is not one of being driven by your wristwatch. And so getting people in line and in the queue so that they could occupy these developments was a challenge. And I think bringing the Siletz tribe in as partners helped with that, in terms of what they brought was the ability to do a certain amount of set-aside units for the projects that they were involved in, which helped us with that. And the process was NEA and property management learning how to get the Native community engaged early, get them on the list, get them in early to help lease up the projects.
Hi, I was curious if you could speak a little bit more about like the service provider coming on very early on in the project and design. Like, what sort of problems were you able to solve through that? Because I think it's a really good idea, but just like, could you expand on that more? Like, what sort of things were you able to address by coming on?
Sure. Well, one, I can think of a few examples. I think one, I remember many design meetings where both Oscar and I were really focused on lines of sight and really emphasizing that importance of visibility and lines of sight. Also really stressing the importance of having those staff offices in a very visible area, in a very welcoming area where it's just going to be a natural flow, so people are going to have to go by those staff offices. Many buildings, a staff office is kind of off to the corner, somewhere aside, because it's assumed people want privacy, which is helpful, but for staff trying to outreach people, it's really important to be visible. So those are just a couple examples. Another one was actually with unit design. There was a 3-bedroom unit that was designed, and I noticed that from the master bedroom, you would have to like make 3 turns in order to get to the other bedrooms. And I said, that's not going to work. You really need to have, we need to reconfigure this so that the bedrooms are close together, because a parent is going to not want to, they're not going to, it's an uneasy feeling if you have to, go down a hallway and make 3 separate turns just to get to your child's bedroom. So those are a few examples of things that, I was really looking at it through that lens and able to point out. We also set up a great training on trauma-informed design from an organization based out of Denver that designed some homeless shelters there. And the biggest part, I think, was helping to organize focus groups with potential residents. And the input that we got from those focus groups was sometimes surprising. Some of it was what I expected, and some of it was very surprising. As Brian mentioned, the security cameras. I was very surprised that people said, we want security cameras everywhere. That is what's going to make me feel safe, is if there are security cameras in lots of places. And so those are just some examples.
I have 2 questions, if I may. First, the partnership with the Siletz tribe, were you able to establish those unit set-asides without the tribe having to bring money to the table, just through MOUs or service agreements?
Yeah, I can respond to that. So it was really a negotiated process in how much the tribe was willing to contribute their housing block grants, and how many units we could allocate and sort of where that fit into our stack of funding. So that was really negotiated. To maybe follow up on Brian's earlier comment, is because those are a tribal funding source, that supersedes the Fair Housing Act, and we were able to provide priority under the Siletz Nation being a sovereign nation, and providing priority to those members. So those are designated units within 2 of the buildings that allows for a certain number of units to go to those tribal members, and if there's no other tribal member, we can defer those to tribally enrolled members, federally recognized, that is. And then
Thank
second
you.
question.
Second question, regarding the community gathering spaces, do you have any lessons learned, or can you share any more insight about how you designed those spaces and then how they operate for residents in real life and programming?
That seems like that would be all 3 of us. Do you want to take a stab on how those were designed?
I'll start with the design. They were all, I think, in each of the projects, yes, going through the list, they were all designed with the intentionality that the Native culture really it was meaningful to gather as community, and so they were always sized, to the largest extent we could accommodate. They all have kitchen facilities. They're all built for gathering, and so flexibility. We don't know what's going to happen there. We just know a lot of things are going to happen there. And so we're trying to create flexible spaces, kid spaces, as you saw both in Mammoth and in Hayu, those intentional spaces for the children. But it's really done with the knowledge that this community wants to be able to gather. So we have to provide them the space and the amenities that allow that to happen.
I'll just talk briefly about kind of integrating our programs. So we know that there's some programs and how we want to use them. And coming out of COVID too, we're like, how can we get people to gather? So we did do some things like digital upgrade infrastructure. And we really tried to set the stage so that our programs could come in and utilize the space, whether it's our early education or our youth services or our cultural team. So, in some reflections, it's a shell, but also we tried to realize how we could be most successful with the programs we are providing. And then another thing, I guess some of the nuances was how do we kind of create open community spaces, but also provide security. So I think we still kind of go back and forth with sort of like having the doors locked at certain times and when those are available, and having residents, sign up for when they want to do events and being responsible for the rooms at those times. So it is part of a management process, but we're figuring that out and improving on it. Amy's good. Thank you for the question.
Hi, so my question is for Brian. So after, it seems like you've worked with PHB and then also with NAIA on a couple different projects. Working and learning about culturally specific trauma-informed design, I'm just curious what that has done for you and what's your experience and what you take away from this. I also work at NAIA and I'm very grateful for our team, but I work with a lot of different professionals and we're trying to just figure out a way to have our professionals be trauma-informed, right? And what that's like and what they take away from that. So I'm just curious what this has done for you.
Well, as architects, we're trained, and I'm looking at all the architects in the room. We are trained, and we do this because we want to connect with people. We want to design for people. I think the architects who work on affordable housing and community development, many of us have a more corporate background, and we couldn't take it anymore, and we ran to community. And so our work with NAIA just took that desire and that passion to a new level. And we've been fortunate to work with several different culturally specific organizations in our work. I think our work with NAIA really taught us what it meant to observe, to listen, to really immerse ourselves in a culture and understand what that means in the physical environment and the built environment, and to really pay attention. And so when we've been able to work with other culturally specific organizations, we've been able to to take that training that we received and that experience that we went through and apply it to other clients and developments and communities.
Yeah, hi. So thinking about, I actually live down the street from both of your properties in Coley. They're your newest ones, and I feel being even though being like indigenous to across the border, southern, and I feel the kind of the healing, you know, from seeing those patterns just driving down the street. And I'm thinking about, you know, doing that for our org, or like at least, you know, taking initiative to make something happen with that at our org, Hacienda. And I'm just thinking, you know, like I guess reaching out to folks, how did you do it? Because I'm thinking, how would I know which designs to pick? There's so many designs, you know, in Mexico, indigenous designs, and so many different ways we could do it. And, you know, people are from all over. You know, even there's people in Guatemala. So it's like, how did you pick the designs? How did you have focus groups or, you know, meetings to kind of decide all that? Because there's a lot of cultures out there, you know? So, yeah, just more on that.
I can take that, Brian. Yeah, thank you for the question. That's one thing we didn't cover in detail, but we were very intentional on how we solicited to artists, and a lot of that was within our community, but also we, with each project, we kind of did different, we brought together community leaders internally to really hone in on what our vision was, what we wanted to achieve. And then we did, you know, open solicitations or, you know, by invitation. It depends on the project. We reached out to specific artists, whether like some of the ones that had the Confederated Tribe of Siletz Indians, we worked with them too. They provided artists they thought could contribute. There's artists who've been involved with NEA. You know, the interesting thing with NEA is that we are not, you know, an arts organization, but there are other, like the Native Arts and Culture Foundation as well. And there's other resources that we leaned into to really have a defined approach before we started the process. And then when we worked with artists, we had them submit work. We talked and interviewed with each of them, and we really got their investment in the project. So we know that they weren't just producing something that was just commercially going to be applied. They were also engaged in the project, and it just reflects on our intentionality. But then even with like maybe Hayu Telexum and Lillian Pitt, like she's like, well, we've done metal work before, and here's how we've done it. And we really pushed them to say, well, can we do it this way and this way? And really pushing the artists, once they were engaged, to sort of be innovative and do things that they hadn't done, but we knew that they were able to do. So like the mural at Mamuk Tokati, that artist was emerging, and that was actually his first mural. And it was a great opportunity for him to learn that and really apply his craft in a larger scale. And now he's really successful in doing a lot more public art commissions. So it really started off with a plan and how we wanted to approach this as an organization, and how leadership brought other voices together. I know Amy has been on some of the art committees, and we've used some other NARA staff, and it really evolves. And like, what is the project trying to achieve, and what voices do we want to bring in to help plan for this? So, and we obviously welcome more cultural art to Coley and any of the neighborhoods. I feel like it would add so much level of depth and value, and having other people be invested in their neighborhoods in that way. I really support the public art movement. So.
Just to add to that, it's a great question, by the way, a really good question. And as much as we have always tried to ground our work together in place, and, you know, honoring where we are and the history of the place and the geography of the place, we also recognize that we are serving urban Indians from all over who aren't necessarily from the Northwest. They could be from the Midwest, the East Coast, the Southwest. And we're always talking about that as we select our art and select our forms, select our colors, that we're very mindful that we're serving a broad range of Native Americans, all with their own cultural backgrounds.
All right, I've got a couple questions about maintenance and just how you think about material selection and color selection from a maintenance when considering maintenance concerns, knowing that you lean that your projects have lent towards family-sized units and that kiddos can be pretty rambunctious and maybe hard on some of especially unit interior fixtures, and even just like wayfinding colors. One thing that we're finding is when we have a really fun wayfinding color and then we need to go do touch-ups, we find, oh, that color is on back order for 2 or 3 months. So then we have to make a decision of whether we defer that maintenance for 2 or 3 months. So just how you navigate that in your design process.
Well, we definitely look at durability and knowing that we're serving, some of the most difficult populations and people that are coming right out of homelessness. So we do approach with a lens of durability, especially in the units, and we limit, like for instance, carpeting to the bedrooms, and then more resilient surfaces in the living areas. The other thing too is we also have to balance acoustics, and we kind of put a lot of work into like the sound deadening and like having that level of privacy. So that's really important into this. But in terms of also with maintenance, I think with the colors and the selection, we'll put on some anti-graffiti coatings, but we have noticed that maintenance will come by and like, oh, that's not the right color, but we're, working through that and, really emphasizing like here's, the different colors in these spaces. I think with, for high utilixum, for instance, we noticed that the amount of work and dedication that murals take, and doing multiple murals in a building is challenging, not only on the construction process, but also how to maintain those. So even with high utilixum, using the vinyl wall graphics, we're not seeing too much degradation on those. We're not sure what the lifespan is, but we've got the digital prints, and at some time we can just replace those with the same image or a new image. So, it's a process. Maybe ask us in 15 years, and we can do a follow-up.
Thank you so much for that presentation. Good question for Brian. It's a bit of a similar question as before. Are there any design components or anything that you've learned from the projects that you talked about today that you would incorporate into any project for any client?
Absolutely. And we talk a lot about that in the office, that especially when we're dealing with the trauma-informed design, even as we have that cultural overlay and that cultural lens that we're applying to it, a lot of our conversation comes around to, this is just good community development. It's bringing people together and building community, whether there's a cultural tie or just people living in community together and getting along as good neighbors. And so we're constantly looking at what we've learned from these projects, as well as, like our work with FHDC or PCRI. We're looking at what we're learning from one culture to the next, and we're just really trying to apply that to developing good community. So the way we arrange our spaces, the way we accessorize our spaces to allow people to come together, the visibility that we talked a lot about, from a trauma-informed lens and a management lens, just lends to people trusting each other and feeling safe in their environment, which brings people together. So we're almost anything we talked about today, we're taking that and applying it to other projects as well and seeing how it could work there.
So thinking about the ongoing maintenance, because coming from the asset management side, that's something we always think about. How did you engage with property management on these projects to make sure that when there was a handoff that they kind of knew what they were getting and knew what they would need in order to take care of the art and the materials and the common spaces?
Well, it's been a as you go sort of process. You know, the nice thing that we've noticed on our properties is that the art is actually respected. We haven't seen any sort of vandalism or people respect it. You know, we feel like I was surprised when I first toured Nisaikalea. I was like, oh, the art's still on the wall. But that is just really, that shows the value that it has within the community. So that keeps us at a perspective where the community actually helps maintain it. Now, in terms of like how we work with property management, I mean, we're just trying to provide a durable and resilient piece like the anti-graffiti and making sure that we have the right coatings. And I think sometimes there's always the technical installation, so we always appreciate having the architect and their team to like rely on the coatings we need to be using or the different applications. So, you know, I think, I don't think we've really developed the science on what the handoff is with property management and how they care for art, because we haven't written that into those contracts yet. But maybe there will be an art clause in the future on how those are maintained and operated. So thank you for the question, though.
Thank you. Thank you for all the work you do. My question is on culture part. Most of the culture we have, there's one or two family in one roof. How do you guys navigate on that issue? Thank you.
Fair housing question.
Buy as much square footage as we possibly can, and you know, try to develop open floor plans. We are trying to be flexible, and the Nisaikalea project actually is designed with openings, hidden openings between units. And I'm not sure any of them have been utilized, but we framed in openings so that if in the future you wanted to connect two units for a larger family unit, you could. So, anything else come to mind?
I mean, I'll just say we recognize the need for multi-generational housing and other different housing models. And I know, you know, a lot of these, I mean, all of these are obviously our typical apartment buildings of 1s, 2s, 3s. But we're continuing to look at that and explore it, and we have the need within our community. We know that other communities have those needs, and you know, I'm hoping that our funders and our institutions can kind of move in that direction and realize that more flexibility will enhance the cultural relativity for housing, and knowing that we have more diverse needs than what we can always provide at our current resources. So I think that's a good one to end on. I feel like there's always things we can be improving, and definitely looking how we can expand this to other models of housing would be amazing. So thank you all for your time and letting us share the work. And we look forward to any questions afterwards if you like.